Stealing Your Heart. Chapter 4: A Marriage Without Wedding or Ceremony. Even though that was a question, there was no space for rejection. Lin Xinyan nodded. It seemed like he had something to tell her. It was perfect as she wanted to speak to him too. Lin Guan eyed Lin Xinyan with a warning look and said, "You should know how to read the situation." If she had offended him even before marrying him. Looking at Zhong Jingha's face, it seemed like he was dissatisfied with Lin Xinyan. The Lins needed the Zongs, they would be useful for their business. He would not allow Lin Xinyan to mess up this marriage. Lin Xinyan pretended that she saw nothing and followed closely behind Guanjing. She knew exactly what Lin Guan was thinking. Why was he thinking? Did he expect her to help him after marrying into the Zongs? Just because he was her father. Yet he had never treated her like his daughter. Did he even know how she lived through these 8 years? Lin Xinyan was lost in her thoughts until she bumped into something hard with her head. When she lifted her head, all she saw was that perfect face, watching her from above. As expected, he could stand. And it meant that her guess was right. Lin Xinyan could feel the hair standing up on her arms. She looked at him pretending to be calm and said, "You were pretending to be handicapped, weren't you?" Zhong Jingha narrowed his eyes. It did not feel great to have someone read through his mind. His tone was intimidating as he asked, "Why marry me even if you knew I was handicapped? What did you see in me? Money? Do you wish to become a wealthy mistress?" Under his gaze, she felt a draft seeping through her body. Her heart was gripped tightly by an invisible hand, and she could barely breathe. However, she showed of that none on her face and replied, "I was 2 when this marriage was arranged. Could I have understood the concept of wealth at that age by begging my mother and yours to engage us?" She paused to catch her breath before continuing. "When I was 2, you were already 10. You are older than me by 8 years. Have I ever complained that you are old?" Zhong Jingha sneered in his heart. Not only was this woman good with her words, she was also quick-witted. Very well. Him? Old. There was a whiff of gunpowder in the air. 2 pairs of eyes looked at each other. Sparks flew and no one wanted to back down. Her hands that rested on the sides were clenched into fists. The only reason she had agreed to this marriage was because Lin Guan promised that he would return her mother's dowry to her. Making him the enemy was not her goal. She softens her tone and said, "Mr. Zhong, I know you don't want to marry me. Actually, it's not that bad." She paused intentionally to watch Zhong Jingha's expressions. He hid them well, but she still spotted them. "Mr. Zhong, let's make a deal," Lin Xinyan said. She never really thought about marrying into the Zongs. She had agreed to the marriage, but it was just to return to this country and take back what was hers. "Ha!" Zhong Jingha laughed. It sounded like a joke to him. He would never strike a deal with her. Lin Xinyan swallowed. Her back was layered with cold sweat from being nervous. Zhong Jingha was tall, and she had to look up to talk to him. "I know that you are pretending to be handicapped to make the Lins back out on this marriage. I will agree to keep the promise, for I have my reasons." This caught Zhong Jingha's interest. "What do you want?" "A deal that came with conditions." "A month? We'll marry for a month. Then we'll go for a divorce." A month was enough. Once she got hold of her mother's dowry, she would go for a divorce. "This is the deal you want to make with me?" Zhong Jingha frowned. "Yes. This is a marriage we would have go through. This was the promise made by our mothers. We can't back out of respect for them. After we got married, we could say that we weren't a good match, then file for divorce. You could carry on with your life, so I don't see this can be unfavorable to you." She slowed down. "I believe there is someone else that you like. That's why you've been trying so hard to make the Lins back out from the engagement." Zhong Jingha's face turned gloomy. There was a slow but steady anger in his voice as he said, "Aren't you smart?" Yes. He wanted to give Bai Druwei a place she deserved. He was touched by her sacrifice and quiet suffering at that time. Zhong Jingho rested his gaze on her pretense. What about you? What is that you gain for a 1-month marriage? Zhong Jingho would never believe that she did just thinking of his interest. Lin Xinyan felt a shoot of worry. She couldn't say that she did it for her mother's dowry. Could she? And yet if she does not come up with a reason, he would not believe in her. My mother was very worried about this marriage. She's not the best in health. So I didn't want to disappoint her. She glanced elsewhere when she said this. She was lying, as her mother never wanted her to marry into the Zongs. Zhong Jingho's tone held a hint of intimidation, as if he knew what she was thinking about. Is that so? Lin Xinyan felt as if there were thorns pressing onto her back. His gaze was so sharp, like he was reading through her mind. When she was thinking hard for the next move, the phone in his pocket rang. Zhong Jingho gave her one last glance before taking out his phone. When he saw the name on the screen, his was softened. He turned around to pick up the call but turned back again and said, "If it's just for a month, there will be no need for a wedding." Lin Xinyan had no choice but to say yes. On the 12th of August, Guanjing came for Lin Xinyan. There was no ceremony nor a wedding. There was just signing of the marriage certificate. Lin Xinyan didn't feel too upset, as she knew that this was just a deal between them. They would never have crossed paths if it was not for the engagement. After some time, the car stopped in front of a villa. Under the bright sunlight, the magnificent stone-built villa seemed impressive. "Do go in," Guanjing signaled her. He showed no passion nor interest in her. He just did his job as usual, which meant that he knew that her marriage to Zhong Jingho was just to keep the promise. She was not a real young mistress in the Zongs. Although the house was large, there was barely anyone around but only a maid. Guanjing barely introduced her around before leaving her in the house. Lin Xinyan did not feel very comfortable. "This is young master's house. I take care of him. You can call me Aunt Yu." Aunt Yu brought her to the room and told her, "If you need anything, please ask for me." A month was not a long time, and Lin Xinyan brought her own things. It was unlikely that she would ask for anything from Aunt Yu, but still she replied, "All right." Aunt Yu opened the door, turned around and looked at her. She hesitated, then sighed and said, "Young master might not be coming home tonight. It's Miss Bai's birthday today." Although they did not have a wedding, she was still his wife in paper. This was the first day of their marriage, and yet he had gone out to spend time with another woman. Aunt Yu felt pity for Lin Xinyan. This was only the first day, and she had already been treated poorly by Zhong Jingho. What will become of her in the near future? Welcome to download Bravonovel app to read more chapters of Stealing Your Heart novel online.